Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm April Crockett. I'm the lecturer in the Computer Science Department here and the chair of the Computer Science Diversity Committee. And thank you all for joining us in our first talk of the Spring 2021 Diversity and Inclusion Seminar Series. It's a really great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who's going to talk to us about leadership. Our speaker, Crystal Duggar, is the Vice President of Clinical Service at Health Trust in Nashville. She's responsible for the administration of clinical research, education, analytics, clinical consulting, and strategic development of clinical offerings for Health Trust. Crystal has a rich background in healthcare programmatic development, care management, clinical innovation, and advisement. She is an executive nurse that developed and implemented clinical programs, combining technology and care to improve outcomes. She received her Master's of Science in Business Administration and Healthcare from Governors University, and her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Tennessee Tech University. She is nationally recognized for her work around developing world-class cancer programs, care management programs, and implementation of artificial intelligence technology and analytics into clinical care settings. She has 3 daughters ranging in the age of from 17 to 22 and has been married for 25 years to Jeff Duggar, who is also an alumnus from Tennessee Tech. And Crystal's also my sister. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Crystal Duggar.
Thank you. That's so funny, you clap. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Everyone can hear me, April? Good, yes. Good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this hour is one of the better hours and not boring. I'm doing my very best to make sure we stay engaged and that this is a conversation that is helpful. I do get the blessing of coaching and mentoring and sponsoring several up-and-comers in our organization, which is HCA. You may have heard of HCA. It's the largest hospital corporation in the United States and owns Health Trust, which is the supply chain that 30% of your supplies that go out to hospitals in the United States comes through Health Trust, and then Parallon, which is a shared service. So I know we have a lot of computer science majors on this call, and there's a lot of opportunity at HCA, Health Trust, and Parallon. So I hope you look into our organization after you graduate or even during for some opportunities, because we would love to have Tennessee Tech alumni. But thank you. The other thing is my sister is, some people don't get along with their siblings. I want you guys to know that she is the best person, much better person than I'll ever be, that I've ever met, and she worries about you guys all the time. Are you learning? Is she giving you what you need? Is she teaching you what you need? She truly cares. So you've got a great teacher, and I know I'm biased, but I'm not just saying that because she's my sister. She is my person that I go to too. So you guys are lucky there. She spends way too much time. In fact, I'm a little jealous of you guys, worrying about you all because I want to go hang out. So I'll have to talk to her after that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about leadership, those soft skills, and then I've got some very tactical things on how to land that dream job. And just a second. There we go. Some tactical things on how to land that dream job as you're coming out of school. You may already have your dream job, but these are all things that I really think that if I could pull every Tennessee Tech alumni out and say, here's the things that I wish someone would have told me before I had my career, that it would have been very helpful for me. Some of these are very black and white. We're also going to talk a little bit about the virtual world and interviewing in the virtual world, because I know many of you guys are going to have to do that. In fact, most people that we hire right now, we're doing at least the first and second interviews, which, yes, you heard me say first and second. You're usually going to have multiple interviews to land that dream job. but those interviews are all online. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you exude executive presence and professionalism and who you are in a virtual atmosphere. So those get a little tactical, and then we'll pull it back up and talk about communication and personal brand. I do want you to use the chat feature. Please use the chat feature. I want this to be interactive. I know that that can be a little uncomfortable at first. I feel like I'm constantly asking my teams here to use that. But if you have questions, you're not interrupting. This isn't a normal conversation, it's virtual. So you put those questions in at any time. April will interrupt me and stop me if needed, or you guys can. And then at the end, I can go through all the questions or throughout. We'll just kind of play it by ear a little bit. And there's a couple slides that I do want you all to give some input so we can talk about them. So be prepared for that. Find your chat feature in Zoom. Go ahead and pull it over and be ready for that. So let's dig in, because I have too much content. One of the first things you don't do, and I'm going to teach you, is you don't get too much content for your presentation, but we do. So we're going to try to walk through these. The number one thing I look for when I'm hiring people, and I'm very blessed to be in the position I'm in now. I've always worked in hospital organizations, but for the first time at Health Trust, I work with a very diverse group of people. I've always worked with IT, with our computer. Well, I'm a problem child, to be honest, with my computer. So I work very close with them. But as you heard, I did get to build some AI programs, artificial intelligence programs for to identify cancer and pathology reports, so we can really quickly identify that patient that needs help, and to have a nurse navigator be working with them. It's a really fun project. IT and business came together. But now my role, there's less nurses and clinical people than there are engineers, IT. I've got a clinical informatics team, sales. I have a huge plethora of diverse, in the different way we use diverse, employees. So it's a completely different look. So when I am trying to interview, one of the skills, I assume you have the background with your degree, but emotional intelligence is what I'm really looking for. And unfortunately, 90%, as you can see on this slide, of your top performers will have emotional intelligence, but only 7% of graduates coming out of school, per this study, actually had emotional intelligence. And part of that is because emotional intelligence comes a little bit from experience, but it can be learned. And if you know about it early, then I believe it's something you can really be a top competitor whenever you're looking for that job. So what is it? It's the ability to be aware of, control, and express your emotions, to handle relationships judiciously and empathetically. And so it's basically the ability to have hard conversations sometimes, and to be in a room with people that don't think like you all the time. In fact, the best teams, especially with IT, guys, if you guys are going in computer science, you all are almost never going to work on a team where you're not working with people from completely different backgrounds. So how are you going to manage that relationship when you all both approach situations in a completely different way? You have to have strong emotional intelligence. The first piece, there's three components that we really divide it between: your emotions, as well as accurately identifying the emotions of others. So being a cancer nurse, this was something in my past that I learned very early in my career. I had to tell people that they had cancer. And you can imagine, when you're telling someone they have cancer, I have to assess very quickly, are they understanding what we're talking about? Are they able to make decisions about what we're talking about? Or do I not think they were really assessing what we were talking about? And so we need to continue to have conversations. It's body language. So if their body but their face is, they're doing this, I know that those two things don't connect. And so I can read through body language and through my emotional intelligence that they're not connecting. That's the same thing that you're going to have to do. It's also handling my own emotions. So if someone is saying something and I know they're completely wrong, or I feel like they're completely wrong, not that April and I have ever had any issue like that, And this does not count with siblings. So April, don't get any big ideas, because basically I'm the oldest, so I'm right. That's all there's to it, right? But in a real situation, whenever you're working in a work environment and you're talking to each other and you're not agreeing, being able to think and problem solve, which honestly, that in our country, that's getting less and less. Even in our world, we need to be able to really be the strength, the pillars of emotional intelligence as we walk through our day-to-day life, in our personal life, in every aspect, our professional life of our life. This will take you a long way. In marriages, I've been married, like she said, 25 years. And again, it kind of doesn't count there because I'm always right there too, because, I'm the wife. But if I really took that stance, we probably would have a hard time and not be married 25 years. Sometimes you got to choose your battles. You don't have to win them all. In fact, guys, you all are from Tennessee Tech, and I am a little biased on that. And in fact, I married a Tennessee Tech alum, and one of my oldest daughters is a Tennessee Tech alum from the nursing program. But, you all are very intelligent. To graduate from a school that spends so much time in science and engineering and math and all of these things at a whole nother level, you often will be the smartest person in the room. But being the smartest person in the room is insignificant if you can't use your knowledge to influence and catalyze change, right? So who cares if you're the smartest if you're not able to make a difference and influence others? Because in a matrix world, which when you go in your professional careers, if you think you're going to have one boss, I hate to tell you, you're going to have 52. You're going to have tons of bosses. That's just the way it is. Maybe one that does your evaluation, but you're going to have to work for many, because it's a collaborative world now, in order to solve major problems. And the way to do that is to truly have emotional intelligence, and not just because you're the smartest, ensure you're able to influence change. I always say, when I'm coaching people, you might be right that pedestrians have the right of way, but if a Mack truck is coming at you at 100 miles an hour, you're still going to be dead. So it doesn't really matter, right? You've got to learn how to use your brain IQ and your EQ to really think through things. And then this last one, the other thing I always like to tell people is be a thermostat, not a thermometer. One of the biggest issues is still that high school crap, right? So back in high school, we had cliques and we had drama and mean girls, and we had all those things. Well, guess what? You think that goes away in the professional world, but even I'm at a very, very executive corporate environment. And even in this environment, guess what? There's cliques and mean girls and all of those things. All of these things you think about, drama, gossip. And these are things that are, because I'm a cancer nurse, I'll use this, they're malignancies or cancers to a team, to a great team. So the goal for you, and when I'm looking for someone, I will ask questions like, if you had a t-shirt, what would you put on it as your slogan? What is your motto? But I also will say, when you hear, I want to give you a situation. You're walking in a room, you're brand new, everyone's saying X, Y, Z, and it's easy to say the right answer. Will you get involved in the drama? How would you manage that? And what I want to hear, not only obviously, no, I wouldn't get involved in the drama, but what would you do? And to be able to change that conversation or change the emotion. Have you ever walked into the room right when you're getting ready to take a final, and everyone in the room is all nervous and, did you study? I didn't study. What about this one question? And you're thinking, oh my God, I don't even know what they're talking about. What question? I didn't even study that part. And all of a sudden it goes from 0 to 110 degrees in that room, emotion wise, right? Your job is to be able to know you did your best, because I know you all are. You studied, you were ready. Hold your emotions, and you might be paddling like a duck underwater. But what does a duck look like on top? Completely calm, stable. It brings the emotion down in the room. And guess what? As a nurse, I'll tell you, you eliminate that fight or flight response that your body goes into. And when you go into fight or flight, you can't think clearly. You start to become a really smart idiot, because your brain breaks down and you can't think clearly, right? My sister's laughing at my words. That can be professional when it's correct. So calming down, de-escalation, that is the number one thing that I'm asking people. Don't get involved in it. De-escalate. I want people that I know is going to help me keep the team at bay, help us to stay in an environment where we can make good decisions, but I don't want everyone on my bench to say yes. I want people to push back and feel safe to have those conversations. And in order to do that, you have to have a team with strong emotional intelligence. You just go to the next slide. So just a couple characteristics. This is the one I'm spending the most time on because I do believe, not this slide, but emotional intelligence, that component, because I do believe it's the most important. We'll spend more time on what signs are than aren't. I want you to know that you may have a boss one day that says you can't teach emotional intelligence. Untrue, but there are some things that come very natural to people and some things that don't. There's a book, oh, I'll put it right over here, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's in the back of these slides. April, they will get these slides. Is that correct? Will they have these? They will? Okay, thumbs up, they will? Yeah, okay, cool. So emotional intelligence, this book, in the back, it has, if you purchase it, you can get it on Amazon. I have it in a list at the end so you don't have to write all these things down. But there's a test or a quiz in it that will help you understand where you're at to start. And then it will teach, the lessons in it will teach you how to work through it. Literally, I have 14 copies on my desk right now because our team is going to walk through this at my work. And I've walked every team I've ever had through emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means that you're a change agent. People say no one likes change. Well, I am a weirdo. I do kind of thrive on it. I'm the one that probably creates a lot of that. But being able, I need people that also doesn't necessarily like change to question, wait, why are you doing that? What benefits will it bring us? Financially, does it make sense? Operationally, does it make it sense? Will our outcomes be better? Someone that's able to influence that once those things are true is a change agent. And that's all around that emotional intelligence. Self-aware. Well, honestly, everyone on here might say, yeah, I'm really self-aware, but how do you know if you're not self-aware, right? So being self-aware, there's a tool called Gennardi's Square, and I did not put this in this slide deck, so I'm going to spell it. Jonnardis, Gennardi's. It's the name of the person that created it. It's a tool online. You can get it free. It's a great tool where it has about 20, 30 characteristics. You circle 5 that you believe are your top 5. You're going to want to circle more, but don't. And then you give one to your sister or your brother. You give one to your boss. You give one to a colleague. You give one to a friend. And you see what they say your top characteristics are, if they were going to describe you. They're not good or bad characteristics. They're just characteristics. And the things that you didn't choose or you had no idea, those are your blind spots. You got to know what they are, because you might be relaying a perception that you didn't want to relay in a conversation. Being empathetic, different from being compassionate. Compassion, I feel so sorry for you. I'm so sorry. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to think about you. Empathetic, I feel so sorry for you. What's going on? How can I help you make a plan to get through this? That's the difference. Don't let perfect get in the way of a whole lot better. Don't let perfect get in the way of a whole lot better. I'm going to say that 10 times. Not really, but pretend I did. Because perfectionism, there is no place for it in the real world. And I say that because if we wait until something's perfect, then we're never going to get to that next step. And especially for you guys, my clinical informatics team, they're constantly, the first draft that we put out there on a dashboard, on a tool that we created, a software tool, it has glitches. It's not great, but we're going to make changes as we go. So let's get something out there so we can get feedback back on it and not be defensive when we get it. Balanced. How many times have you said, I just want to have good work-life balance? Have you heard that, or you heard someone say that? Well, I will promise you there will never be a balance. There's never been a time where my job as a wife and my job as a mom and my job as an employee was balanced. But there are rhythms, and you have to make sure that every single one of your roles gets a chance to put their beat out. And what I mean by that is it might be that you're really heavy at work because you have a huge project. And so the rhythm is going to be work. But make sure that you also you have quality time in your home life, your wife life, or your husband life, or whatever that is that you value as in your church. The things that you value, make sure that you have a rhythm to where each thing gets its time in the song of your life, if that makes sense. Because if you try for balance, you're just going to end up being frustrated. In other words, I am here today at work and I have 3 daughters. And if one of them needs me, I'm going to answer the phone and I'm going to take care of them. And then I'm going to go back to work. That might mean that I have to work a little longer later this evening at this life. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm there as a daughter-in-law for my father-in-law in the hospital. So I'm going to make sure I've got that quality time, but then I also, everyone gets a spot. That's the rhythm of life. Be curious, be gracious. I know if you had April as a teacher, you know what that is. So that's something that's been taught to us, but I will tell you, people that are gracious and thankful and can find joy in the small things are the best employees to have and people that we look for, because you have joy in your job, which, by the way, we spend a lot of time at. De-escalate, you're going to hear me say that 1,000 times. De-escalate situations before they get emotionally out of hand so you can handle them. And recognize the need. Guys, how many times, I'm going to go mama on you guys, not guys, but people, did your mom, when you were living at home, say, why is it that I have to, does no one else see that the trash is full? Why do I have to ask you guys to take the trash out? Or maybe you all are just excellent and you took the trash out. But my mom always had to tell me when my clothes were on the floor, because somehow I didn't see them. Untrue. But don't be that person. When you get into your role, recognize the need. Find out what is needed. You were hired because you're smart. The people I hire, I do not know how to do their jobs as well as they do. I am their coach. I am their leader. So in other words, it's almost like a coach on a basketball team. You know, I'm not Michael Jordan, but I'm going to hire Michael Jordan. And then I'm going to listen to Michael Jordan on how to play the game, right? And then I'm going to look from an outward perspective and try to coach that team. It is okay if you're smarter than your boss. I tell my people that every day because they need to know that. It is okay, but you've got to be, that's why you're here. Your job is to help me recognize the need because you're the expert in that area. If you don't have anything to bring to the table, I really didn't need you on the team in the first place, right? So be bold, be intelligent, use all the knowledge you're learning when you get that job and bring things to the table. And then don't get offended or hurt whenever your idea isn't brought forward, and celebrate when it is. Halt, write this down. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, walk away and do not have that conversation. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, halt. Do not have the conversation. That email will not portray what you thought you were portraying when you were typing so hard that you broke your keyboard keys. I promise you. So wait and halt. I'm not going to go through all the signs of poor EQ because I believe they're mainly the opposite. The only one I will bring up, or two actually, one-uppers. Signs of not having great EQ is always having to one-up the other person. If you ever saw Saturday Night Live, Penelope on Saturday Night Live, if not, go to YouTube and Google that. But it's that person that is always, you have a story and they have to tell, that theirs is more drastic, more. You want to work with someone that's a sign that you're, you don't have that confidence. Blaming others for your problems. If it's always your teacher's fault that you didn't make a bad grade or you made a bad grade, or if it's always your whoever, your husband's fault or your wife's fault or your coworker's fault that you didn't meet a deadline, but everyone else is meeting the deadlines, then you need to kind of check yourself. Everyone has issues, and good bosses are going to listen because they know you have a long line of good work. But whenever you are constantly having issues and it's always everyone's fault, that will be noticed. Self-sabotage. Guys, I preach this to my daughter all the time, my daughters all the time too, but also in coaching. Your worst enemy is yourself. It is not anyone else. Make sure that inner voice in your head, that you're speaking positively to yourself, because each one of you, if you're in this program or you're in the roles that you're in, you're pretty dang brilliant in some areas to get to where you're at. So you don't limit yourself. Don't limit how much you will be able to affect and do. I will tell you that growing up, the way April and I grew up in a beautiful family, but not with a lot of money, I would have never dreamed that I would be in the position I exceeded my goals 3 roles back. but through my faith, and then in addition, through just dreaming and solving and finding answers and enjoying that problem solving, I didn't self-sabotage myself. I have before, but that is your worst nightmare. Always think, like, if you stayed up all night and then you have something the next day, you just self-sabotage your ability to be effective the next day. That's a little minimal thing, but you can do that in big things with life, and that's poor EQ. So let's get off EQ. EQ is the most important though. So don't forget, spend time learning it, engaging in it, and what that looks like. And think about people that you've seen that has strong EQ so you can mimic that, which goes into executive presence. So this is your chat time. So if you can, could you chat in which one of these images look the most confident? Image A is this image right here, and image B is the one where her hands are out. B. That is correct. And why is that? So let's talk about that. Many times men and women, whenever they're anxious or they're not confident, they cover their neck, they cover their ears, they cover their private areas, wherever those are, girl or boy. That is just what we do. And you can see she's crossing her hands in front of her areas, her private areas. That is because we try to protect ourselves. That is a mammal-like response of what we do whenever we're nervous. We cover up areas we don't want people to be looking at or being a part of. We make ourselves small. Do you see how her shoulders are turned in? If I was talking like this to you guys, you all would think she has no confidence in what she's talking about. But notice in the other picture, her hands are out, and I'm literally sitting on folders so I can be eye to eye with you guys. So you can't see my hands, but her hands are out. That is hey, I want to work with you. If you're ever in an argument with someone that you love and your hands are down and you're talking like this is telling them you need to get on the defense. This says I'm open to what you're saying. She spreads her body out. Notice her elbows. She doesn't look awkward like this, but she spreads her body out to a point to where she's saying, hey, I'm confident in this space, and I'm going to take up this space because I'm confident here. She's smiling. She's looking at the person. Her head's not down. These are all little things that, honestly, I thought that I looked like picture B, and often I looked like picture A when I would walk in a room. And often, in addition, when you walk in a room, you might walk in a room that is your friend, and you might just spread right out with all your friends, and talk and laugh and all these things. But you might walk into an executive room or a room where everyone is in a higher titled position. They're not higher than you. Always remember that. They put their pants on the same way as you do, but a higher titled position, and all of a sudden you become small. Look at yourself, be aware of that. And one of the things, females, I'm going to talk to you just for a minute. As a male, often in our minds for all of our life, we've seen a man in a suit. They look very nice, very executive, and the suit structure, that boxy structure, already gives them an executive presence. Females, on the other hand, it's not as natural of a picture we have in our head, so it's a little harder for us to have that executive presence. Not confidence, but that executive presence. So some of these things you've really got to think about. Not always. There's never an always with male or female, but sometimes you'll see that men will often walk in a room. They're more natural to spread out. Women are more natural to close everything up and be small. Next time you walk in a room, men and ladies, spread out. Put your arms on the armrest. Put your hands on the thing. You're going to feel awkward at first, but you're not looking awkward. You will be taking up more space, and even through your body, the hormones that will be released, it will tell you, I'm confident. Those poses tell you, they're power poses. They tell you, I'm confident, and you will appear more confident, and you will have more executive presence. So how do we get that? It's not natural. You can't expect to graduate. Well, it is for some people, but it's usually not natural, right? So when you graduate or when you're early in your career, you kind of need to think about someone that you appreciate their characteristics and their core values. Maybe it's a celebrity. Maybe it's a person in your church. Maybe it's a friend, but you feel like they hold that integrity, credibility. You trust them. They're confident. How do they look? And watch them. It sounds a little strange, but watch them, observe them. What do they wear? How do they talk? How do they stand? How do they sit in a room? Do they speak up and talk over everyone, or do they listen and wait and then speak up? Observe those and mimic them. It's one of the best ways that you can really figure out what your style is. Now, saying that though, I always want you to be your authentic self. Getting a sponsor or a mentor or a coach, which I'll talk about the difference of those in just a minute, but having someone to help you walk through this is also very helpful. A sponsor is someone that maybe they don't have time to mentor you, but they're in a very high position and they value you, and so they are reaching to you and pulling you up through the organization and supporting you in that political environment or organizational environment at a job. So they're not investing in a way of time to teach you how to do something, but they are your sponsor. There's someone that has your back and wants you to succeed and will speak for you. A mentor is actually someone that's going to take a weekly or monthly or quarterly time with you to really walk through your development. A coach really leads you through specific things. I had a coach on executive presence because that was something I really specifically wanted to work on. She was a hard coach, let me just tell you, but she was brilliant and she did a lot for me. But one of the things she asked me to do was lose my accent. Now, I have not lost my accent, as you all can tell, but it may be a little better. That's probably because I live in Nashville, not East Tennessee. But that was for when I spoke without my accent, I wasn't authentic. I wasn't genuine. I wasn't Crystal. So it was, you've got, through all of her coaching, I took 98% of what she said and put it into what I do when I'm in an executive room. Didn't change who I was, but that I didn't change. So with any of these, you still have to assess for yourself what is best for you to be your authentic, true self. Know when to lean in and when to lean out. What I say by that, I have a tendency to overtalk in a meeting other people. I have ideas and I want to think out loud and I'm an extrovert and things are going all the time, okay? So, and I'm not doing it on purpose, but all of a sudden, I just sucked the joy out of that room. I sucked the life out of that room and I feel like it was a great meeting and everybody else is like, well, that was not good or productive. Others may go into a room in a meeting and they have all these things that they may be thinking, but they're processing them and they never speak up at all. And that's a problem too. Both of those are two extremes. You've got to learn when is enough to speak in and when it's not. When do you need to say it? Or are you just saying it because you want to look like the smartest in the room and not necessarily bringing good content? And then invest in yourself. And honestly, your work, find a role, maybe not your first job, but it might be, you might be lucky, but find a role where you will, that company invest in you too, which, you know, HCA Parallon Health Trust, I am proud they've invested a ton in me to really be what I need to be. But I also invested in myself. I went back to get my master's. I read constantly and listen to Audible, podcasts. I am going to conferences. Find out ways to become your best self and to learn your role and be a life learner. And we're going to talk more about feedback in a second, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. One of the big things when you are walking into your new role and that you're showing that executive presence and that integrity, we used to say the very first thing was the handshake. Well, what do we do now, right? Because that's not what we're doing. And we literally had a whole several steps that we would teach our directors and AVPs, our assistant vice presidents, how you walk in and do a handshake that gives you that presence right off the bat. So actually, I don't want you to do these, but I thought it was funny and I couldn't help myself. I will say I've never in an executive world gone to our CEO and did a hip bump. I think that would be really awkward. Or even a foot bump. We have done an elbow bump, but he went for it first, right? You know, usually just it's all about confidence. And actually, don't worry, we're all awkward in this right now. We're not sure really what to do. But what I have found, and what I'll tell you, and I am in an executive world, most people kind of do a nod, hi, how are you, a little hand wave. If that's uncomfortable for you, figure out what is, so you know what you're going to do right off the bat, and practice it. I know that sounds awkward, but practice how you're going to walk in on the very first moment, because if you get that right, your anxiety will reduce in an interview or in an executive meeting, and then you'll be able to go from there. But if you get it wrong and it's awkward and uncomfortable, the rest of the meeting might be. Introduce yourself, and this is going to feel awkward, but you're going to be very confident and say, hi, my name is Crystal Duggar, and I'm the Vice President of Clinical Services. Nice to meet you all. So you notice I paused between, not Crystal Duggar, but I paused a little bit on my name between the first and last. I don't want you to forget it. I want you to know who I am, but I don't want to be, I don't want to come across that I'm all high and mighty either, right? Practice these things. These seem like little things, but when you go for a new job or you are in your first job, you are being compared to people that honestly at the beginning of your career have the same resume as you do, or maybe yours is just a little better. So how are you going to make yourself stand out? How are you going to make yourself look different? It's all about that emotional presence and that impression. A smile, looking into their eyes, and we're going to talk about how you do that whenever you're virtual. You might be doing a virtual meeting. Hold your head high, make that good first impression, and practice. Practice, practice, practice. So look at these. I won't make you chat in on this one, but these are all different things. And yes, they're extreme, but I have seen every one of these on calls. I promise you, on professional calls with professional businesses. I've also been on professional calls with new software tools that are trying to be sold to me. And in the background, I can see that they didn't make their bed. Guys, I didn't make my bed either, but it's not in the video, right? It's not on camera. So there's things like that just be professional. Just because you're on video in that executive environment, we're not talking about in the classroom, we're not talking about these things where you're learning or even when you're part of a team and you've been with that team a while. I'm talking about when you're making that first executive impression, or you're in a meeting where you're trying to elevate the perception of you in that meeting. Notice these, don't look bored, and notice the things that they're doing. Hands out, body up, blazers, ladies. If it's a true interview, a blazer, an executive, get you one good suit. And if you're low on money, honestly, even Goodwill, I'm comfortable in how much money I make today now, but I will tell you that I go to GW's, Goodwill, all the time because I'm not going to pay a fortune if I can get it for that price. I do it all the time. That's how April and I were raised, and so there's no shame in that game. So do what you need to do to have the right outfit to be ready for that meeting. And then once you land that job, remember, grow where you're planted. That first job may not be that career job that you thought was that end-all be-all that you really, really wanted, but it's going to get you there. So you have to do well in that first role, grow where you're planted, where you're first there, and remember, now your career is your interview. I have not gone and been interviewed in a long time for a role. Although I've moved up in my role several times, it's been because people have seen what I've accomplished, tapped me on the shoulder and said, now I want you to take on this. So remember, that's your role. I'm not going to go too much in this because I want to make sure we get to personal brand and communication. But know in this slide deck, I've included a couple things to ensure that you are doing the virtual interview well. That is really important because if you are on camera, little things, remember, if your resume is not that big of a differentiator from others, remember that how you appear on that call is going to be a big difference. Some people are more natural on camera than others. These are just little things. I think it's over the top. I'll just go ahead and tell you, but there's some great pointers in here. Make sure that you have a good camera or the camera on your laptop, but make sure you have good lighting. Guys, a ring light is 20 bucks on Amazon. I know 20 bucks can be a lot for a college student if you're a student on this webinar, but it is a good investment when you're going to get your first job if you know you're going to do a lot of virtual webinars. A laptop stand, guys, I told you I'm sitting on 5 folders right now. If you don't want to invest in a laptop stand, prop your computer up, prop yourself up, whatever you need to do to be able to look eye to eye when you're in that interview or in that executive conference, that meeting. Solid colors, if it's an interview, is perfect. Don't worry about it once you get the job and you're in a team room, unless you're just in a really stuffy environment. And why did you take that role anyway? Who wants to be in that? So that gives you some ideas. Also, in an interview, I love in our team meetings, we have some really amazing backgrounds. It looks like people are in Hawaii. I'm jealous. They're not. They're staying in their living room, and their kids have messed up the break room or whatever, or their bonus room, and they don't want us to see it. So backgrounds are great, but if you're in an executive conversation, then you want to have a blurred out background or a very plain background. Nothing that's going to take away from you. You don't want it. It needs to be about you and what you're saying, not about what you're wearing or your background. Those should be just out of the picture, or the lighting or things like that. And guys, I have so many dogs at my house. It's ridiculous, because all my kids are home from college because of virtual, or they've just graduated, and my in-laws live with me and they have dogs. But you got to put those dogs up in an interview. You got to find a way to not, when the Amazon truck comes, you can't even hear what you're saying. So these are just little pointers. We've already gone through some of these. I'm just going to flip through them quickly. But right before your interview, if you can take this deck and just pass through it quickly, or the night before, to get everything ready, I think these will be helpful. I am going to stop on this slide because this is something I see often. If you are in a meeting or a presentation, April does this well in her classes when she's doing the Zoom. Help people to know what you're talking about. You don't know how many times I've been on a call and people are saying, in that graph, and there's 12 graphs on this page, I don't know which one they're talking about. So make it easy for your audience to follow you. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see a graph that's labeled blah. Help them to see that. And then your check off. So a lot of good tools that you can use if you're in that conversation. Let's flip to brand. You all have a brand. You may not want to be labeled, but the world's going to label you anyway, right? So if they're going to label us, what can our personal brand be? What do we want people to say about, what do you want it to be? And then I want you to ask some people, if you were going to describe me in 3 sentences, describe me, and see if it's consistent with what you wanted, because everyone has this, everyone. And then whenever I'm looking for someone to serve on my team, many of them are consultants. So the product isn't an Apple phone, which there's a brand to this Apple phone, the way it looks, very sleek, the apps, all of those things. The product are the people. So I want them to look professional. I don't want them to have dog hair all over their clothes. I want them to own a lint brush. I know these things sound very ridiculous, but if that's my product, is your brain, then that is super important for me, and that's called executive disposition, for me to ensure that you are carrying the executive disposition of my organization or my team. So it's not to own that person, but it's to make sure that you're in line with it. And you want to have, if you're wanting to move up in the world in a company, then you need to make sure your brand is one that exudes confidence, credibility, integrity, professionalism, emotional intelligence. So how do you want to be perceived? Branding is a collection of perceptions about you. I know I made a little note here. Let me look in here. And you control this. So make sure you do reach out. And it's homework for this. I want you just to find out. If you don't know what your brand is, everyone else does. So find out what that is. And we talked a little bit about that. This is a big one. Guys, it hurts. It hurts to hear what we're not good at, because if you had a good mom, they told you were good at everything. And I tend to believe you probably were pretty good at most things, but there is something holding you back. There is some type of thing that whenever we are looking at all of our employees, we do something called 9-box. And basically it's a graph, and you say, are they ready to move? Are they not? Why are they not? Do they have what they need? IQ, EQ, all of these. And we do that with every employee every year through all layers of the organization at HCA. But every time we have those conversations, it comes up, well, I don't think they're ready because, do you know what the because is? If you don't, do you want to know? Because if you don't know, it's going to keep holding you back until someone tells you. For me, it was executive presence. I came from a world where when you walk in, it's like, hey, we all put our pants on the same way. I'm a nurse. Let's just get it done. It didn't matter if I had this suit on or that, if I was speaking in a certain way, because I am very informal in my style, which is okay, but it has to be informal, professional. And so I got a coach and a mentor, and I listened and I heard the feedback. And I got I believe it's my next slide. Oh, it's not. It's coming up. I got a feedback buddy. I got someone in every meeting. I would say, your job is after this meeting to tell me 3 things I did well and 3 things I didn't, because I need to hear them, even if it hurts. That's what your job is. Find out. Don't be defensive. Learn what those are. Invest in this book. It's in the back, FYI. It's an HR book, actually, but it will teach you, it's short little excerpts of how to deal with all these things that are flaws in our professionalism. This just sums up those things that we just talked about on your personal brand. It's a checklist, and I've put a checklist after each section. So you can go back and look at these if you want to later. Not that I think the majority of you will, but if you wanted to. Communication, this is key. Written, virtual, in every style, communication is really, really important. The biggest thing I see, especially from my clinical informatics team and my clinical, so my IT team and my clinical, my nurse team, is you all want to give every detail. When I ask a simple question, hey, how did you get that tulip to grow so easy? Well, first I went to Lowe's and I bought some dirt, and then I planted it, and then I put water on it, and then it grew, and then I noticed the sun, and I'm like, I didn't really want to know all that. I just want to know, oh, you need Miracle-Gro, you need to put it in sunlight, and you need to make sure you have good fertilizer. If I need to know more, I'll come back and say, now, what kind of fertilizer did you say? So speaking in bullets, that's why the news is the news. That's what they do. That's why the newspaper does what they do. Speak in bullets. Your job is to be the expert and know the details. When you're speaking to an executive, you got to sum it up, because remember, I'm a VP. I have 3 AVPs that report to me. And of those, they each have 3 directors, so 3 work streams that will report to me. I report to the chief medical officer. He has 4 VPs. So he has all of that from each one of them reporting to him. And he reports to the CEO, which has all of that. They don't have time to know what grade fertilizer you got. They just want to know the 3 things, okay? So working through communication and learning how to do that, if they want to know more, they'll ask. And here's how you do it. Keep it to 3 bullets if you can. Answer the question, yes, no. Actually, yes, I did use that. 3 things, and then give a sentence to support, or 2 on each one of those things. That's how you write it. That's how you do it. They'll appreciate that so much, and they'll trust you, because they know if you can explain it so well that it's simple to understand, then you know it well enough, and they can trust you, and they're going to move on, and they're going to really go really deep in the person that can't answer that question that easily. I said this a couple times, practice in front of a video camera, practice your presentations, practice your introduction, look up interview questions, practice them. I already gave you one. If you had a shirt and you had a slogan on it, what would it be? What is a weakness for you? What is a strength for you? And guys, I love honesty, but if your weakness is the #1 role of the position, don't share that, or don't apply for that role, right? But what is your weakness? Many of you, it's going to be experience, and that's okay, as long as you're open to learning more, right? And those are the people that we're looking for. And then watch the video. You're going to find things that you just did not realize that you were doing. Swaying, a lot of people sway when they talk, things like that. You're going to notice things. The pause. We don't pause. And I struggle with this probably more than anything, and I'm trying to get through this quickly. So you're noticing I'm getting into this. But what I mean by that is when I say, hi, I'm Crystal Duggar. I am the Vice President of Clinical Services. Or, hi, I'm Crystal Duggar, and I'm the Vice President of Clinical Services. Which one exuded more confidence? Which one did you understand more? Which one were you able to absorb what I was and who I was? Pause. Take pauses in what you have to say. If you're quiet in a meeting, we talked about my personality, but if you have that personality where maybe you're a little more quiet, or it gives you a little anxiety to speak up, work with your boss or your leader to give you the agenda early. That's really important that I put out in agendas so you can process those if you are more someone that processes them, and then make your points early in the meeting, because now you've already opened that up. Like I got you to do chat feature early because I knew that would give you more, you would feel more free to use the chat feature later because you already had it pulled up, right? It's just a psychological tactic. Do that and your brain will allow you to speak up more. Do you speak too much and you get defensive? Stop. It's one of the #1 things that shows that you are not confident. If you can't handle someone disagreeing with you, you're not confident. You struggle with self-awareness. That is one of the key factors that I see when someone gets defensive. It's like they just saw a piece into you that you're not wanting to share. And get a feedback buddy. This is key. I talked about it earlier. If you are doing a presentation, if you don't get a job, I love it when people do this. If you don't get a job and you interviewed, go back and ask, hey, I know I didn't get the role. Thank you so much for the time. Is there anything I could do better in the future in my interview process? I love when people ask me that. And guess what? I think about them for future roles because many times it had nothing to do with them. But sometimes it's like, well, this came across, and then you can learn from that to move forward. This is our last slide. I just tried to really pull everything together to say, hey, observe the behaviors in others. That's the easiest way to get started. Find someone you really respect, you feel like they just exude that whatever you want to be, and then mimic, look deeper into how they stand. How do they pose when they're talking? How do they present? How do they articulate things? Those are the little pieces that create executive presence. Be consistent. You can't be one person whenever you're with one group of people at work and another person with another. Now, we are a little different at home than we are at work, so don't be too hard on yourself. But your personal brand and that core of who you are, be intentional about it. Don't just say, well, I am who I am. Be intentional. Who do you want to be? And how do you want people to perceive you? Virtual executive presence is a learned skill. Don't take for granted that if the interview's on camera, that it'll be fine. Practice, make sure your camera's set up. April and I got on 30 minutes before. I had IT here, and I do these things all the time. But I wanted to make sure that I could see you, that the audio was good, that you could hear me. And I do this all the time. If you don't do this regularly, for sure, set some time aside to do this. Leaders often have very strong emotional intelligence, communication, executive presence. If you don't have these skills, which I do not expect you to have, these are skills that right off the bat that you want to learn. I've included way too many, I'll go ahead and say, but read. Anytime you can read and learn more about how people have done a good job at creating change to influence good outcomes, do that for yourself and others. I think it's just one of the best things I can do as a leader is to make sure that I have the skills and tools to lead. And then these are some classes. One of the biggest things I see people that move up in the system too, which I didn't talk about a lot just because of time, is being able to have a hard conversation. We did a little in emotional intelligence. You are going to have hard conversations. You cannot walk away from every hard conversation, but know how to do that with respect and in a way where you can find compromise. Crucial Conversations is a great class for that. And Toastmasters is a national organization that helps you with speaking events. So I'm going to pause, as I have not done very much because I was trying to get through the material and take a breath and look through this a little bit. April, you've been kind of watching it a little better than I. Are there a couple questions you think rose to the top? And I can answer all of these later too.
I haven't seen any questions, but if there are any questions, you can chat them in. There was a lot of nice comments, people sharing their experiences throughout the chat. Okay, there's one. Are you reading it?
Here, I'm getting there. Okay, I see. Of the books you're recommending, what is the, let's see, I'm sorry, I just flipped. Of the books you're recommending, what are your top 3 that you would want us to look and read? Oh, great question. What a great question. If you're starting your first job out, the first 90 days is a good one, but if you're not there yet, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Oldie but goodie. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Old, but it is the core, you know, where everything comes from. Really, really short, but just kind of nice to do. I'm going to do 4 instead of 3 just because this one's so short. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is another really good one. It's almost more like a newsletter. And then to start, I'm trying to think at the very beginning what would be the best to start. If you're going into a marketing role, those Made to Stick or Switch are really good. But probably Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. Brene Brown she speaks a lot about being a change agent, and she's really good. I read her stuff all the time. All of these are good, but they're for situations. Like I had a really strong boss that was a super boss, which means they have a huge personality. She's amazing, but amazingness always comes with difficulty in reporting to that person sometimes, but a blessing. But they're very intense people. So I read that book to figure that out. So really, what are you going through at the time? Or ladies, sometimes we're not as good about our candor. Sometimes you are, but sometimes we're not. If you struggle with having those candid conversations that need to happen, I forgot what it was called now. Radical Candor is a pretty cool book. Your first leadership role, if you are now going into your first leadership role, read Good to Great. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Just trying. Oh, okay. There's a question about transgender. And honestly, we talk about this all the time. I'm actually on the Diversity Inclusion Committee also. And so whether it's LGBTQ or transgender, or females will ask this question too, like I'm worried about my role. One of the things many organizations are doing is they are taking out the names in the top of resumes. So we can't tell, is it male, female, you know, we can't tell a lot of things from that. So first but the goal is to look at just people for their jobs, and then interviewing, we're looking for these skills. I'm always saying, you know, if you are a great leader, and organizations are different. So I can't see, is it Ricky that asked this question? Organizations are different, but in our organization, I can truly say that we are hiring to these things we talked about. You work on your leadership, your executive presence, find a mentor that is also transgender that has already been successful, and then work with them through that. Watch how they've done it. How did they exude executive presence? How did they relay their personal brand? Make it less about you being transgender and more about you as a leader, an employee, an intelligent person and colleague in your field. I hope that helps, and I'm happy to speak more to you about that. Let me just flip through here really quickly. Any recommendations on how to combat negative inner self-talk and perfectionism, especially as a woman in technology? You know, that is so hard. And actually, several of these books will do that. And I'm happy that you recognize it. If you're a perfectionist, you're really going to struggle whenever you get into a role, because the flexibility in an organization, they're going to go 100 miles an hour one way, and you're going to be so excited, and they're going to say, oh, budget cut. We're not going to go that way anymore. Now we need to change directions. And you're like, my baby, you know, and it's so good, and it's going to do all these things. So one, being aware that you've got to be able to get that flexibility in there. Two, I didn't talk about this, and there's books. Let me think about that. Let's see, is it Mimi? Let me think about that a second, and I'll give April a book that will really help with that. There's one, I didn't include in my list. It's so good for perfectionism. It's like rewiring something, but I'll look it up and send it to you. But also in any of these things, don't ever be afraid to ask for help. Most of your organizations are going to have strong EAP programs, or now there's online counselors and therapy. You know, some of these things might be things that aren't necessarily job things, but they're just things. If you're a perfectionist, that's going to affect your everything, right? If you are anything that you're working on, it's going to affect every part of your life. If it's something you need extra help on, get extra help. That's a part of investing in yourself and getting that. But Mimi, I will send you that book. There's a chapter that started of Toastmasters in Cookeville, I believe. Someone has said. That's exciting. Join that if you get a chance. Being able to present at a podium is so important as you work up in a leadership role.
Crystal, it is 12 o'clock, but I can
Okay.
save the chat and send you any of the questions, if that's okay. Send you any of the questions that you didn't get to so that you can like respond individually. I can give you their emails. Okay.
Well, it's been a blessing. Thank you guys for the time.
I will be creating a web page on our diversity website that will have a recording of this presentation, and we'll have a download link so you can download her slides.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal, for being willing to talk to us and spend your time with us. I think it was excellent. I think the students probably really got a lot out of it. So.
Well, if they didn't, don't tell me. I want to keep that a blind spot. Just kidding. And I don't know if I had a choice, right? You're my sister. No, I thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Is that Dr. Hannah? Ah, hey.